So you guys can fully read this on your own. This is Facts, Fallacies, and the Debate of Glyphosate Toxicity. Now I can tell you the huge problem with the glyphosate thing. It's not toxic like people think it is. You're not going to die from eating oatmeal or something like that because it has trace amounts of this chemical in it, okay? People forget that everything's made of chemicals. Reality is made of chemicals. It's made of molecules, which are made of atoms, okay? So what you need to understand, my biggest concern with that is they used mice where all of the mice got tumors. The ones in the control group and the ones not in the control group. And why? Because they were transgenic mice that were prone to developing tumors. But I'm going to skip to the end. So, as I said, you can see a lot of these stupid theories. A lot of them involve artificial sweeteners. That's a big one. Artificial sweeteners cause this, and this. You see this shit around global warming. Global warming has been blamed for everything from homosexuality to homophobia. I mean, it's absurd. But these things do not bear out in reason when you actually look at the basic scientific arguments. These things are idiotic. Okay? So why am I doing this video? Number one, there's a guy trolling me that's a carnivore. Now, I can tell he's a carnivore because he's asking the same carnivore questions, which actually show a very large lack of knowledge in nutrition. Now, what people don't understand, I am not a nutritionist. I am not a dietitian. I am not a physician. I am not this, I am not that. I'm not a chiropractor, yada, yada, yada. What I am is an out-of-work personal trainer, okay? So I've gone to school. I've taken my fitness and nutrition courses, okay? On top of that, I had a mother with type 1 diabetes, okay? On top of that, I was obese when I was a child due to psychiatric medications, and I had to lose that weight through a combination of a ketogenic diet and then later into a lower carbohydrate vegetarian diet, and then into a lower carbohydrate vegan diet. So I know a thing or two about nutrition. I've also run groups on weight loss. Unfortunately, the people in the group were not more successful because they wouldn't attempt to apply what I was teaching them. Ironically, I ran into a couple of the people years later. One woman lost like 160 pounds, and it was funny because I said, well, how'd you do it? And she said, I just did what you said. I concentrate on eating my proteins and my fibers and my vegetables. Okay? It's a shame she couldn't do that when she was in my group, but she lost 160 pounds eating meats, vegetables, and whole grains. Okay? It's not complicated. Now, what people don't understand, why am I a vegan? I am not a vegan for nutritional purposes. I am a vegan for ethical purposes. Okay? I have been a vegan now for well over a decade. It's going on, I think, like 16 years now I've been a vegan, somewhere in there. Or maybe it was like flexitarian between like basically a vegan and maybe I had like an egg once every 6 months or something like that. Okay? But my point is that I do this for ethical purposes, not nutritional purposes. But there's a lot of stupidity. Like the question was with my suggestion of the supplementation of taurine, glutamine, and what was the other one? Taurine, glutamine, and another nutrient that I recommended, another amino acid. The thing is, carnitine. You don't really need to supplement. If you're a vegan, I very strongly do recommend you supplement with taurine and carnitine to assure a healthy heart. Okay? If you're maxing out your protein requirement on a vegan diet and getting all of your essential amino acids, you probably don't need to take the carnitine. But you probably definitely need to take the taurine still, because taurine is definitely conditionally essential. If you're under stress, we're all under stress, things like that. Now, people on a vegan diet do just fine. What people don't understand is I'm trying to optimize for maximum longevity. You're not going to optimize for maximum longevity regardless of the diet you're on if you don't supplement. People know that Dr. Atkins recommended that everyone be supplemented. Okay? The Atkins diet is more nutritionally balanced. Okay? The actual Atkins diet, if you actually follow the damn thing and you know about nutrition, the real Atkins diet, where you are eating meats, cheeses, in some cases you would be eating whole grains towards the end, but you're eating meats, cheeses, greens, lots of green vegetables on the Atkins diet, lots of fish, okay, lots of tomatoes, lots of okra, lots of things like this. If you're following that diet properly, you're eating lots of celery, lots of cucumbers, lots of these foods. You're getting a lot of micronutrients, okay? It's a very well-balanced diet. It's more well-balanced than most vegan diets because most vegans are not paying attention to their nutrient intakes. But they should be, right? That's what you got to understand. They should be. The problem is most vegans like me do it for ethical reasons. They don't understand that if you want to do something for ethical reasons, you got to do it right, or you're going to get sick, okay? But most vegans, if they pay attention to their nutrient intakes, are going to do just fine, usually even without a B12 supplement. But the B12 supplement is too important, and I'm going to explain why. There are natural sources of B12, but you can't depend on the natural sources of B12. But what you need to understand, nutrient deficiencies happen in everyone. Omnivores, vegans, vegetarians, carnivores. This isn't a new thing, okay? Vegans have done better than the general population for over 100 years, and we know that because of the Adventist studies, okay? So if you don't believe me, look it up. But the problem is that test, this idiotic test with the glyphosate, and this is why it's approved in Europe, just so you know. It's approved by the EU. Almost nothing is approved by the EU except artificial sweeteners and glyphosate. So my point is, it's failed logic. As Richard Feynman, those that are not familiar with Richard Feynman should read Richard Feynman's books. I also recommend reading Carl Sagan's books. But it doesn't matter how beautiful your theory is. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If it doesn't agree with experiment, it's wrong. If this is the problem you have with psychiatry, psychology, all this horse shit. If it's not real, if it's not really happening in reality, it's not real. You dig? So it doesn't matter if it's a great theory that you know, if you eat glyphosate, you'll get cancer. The fact of the matter is that's not what's actually happening in reality. Okay? That's the problem. So a problem with eating copious amounts of meat, okay, and this person was posing, I think, as an omnivore that required a low food mop diet, not a carnivore, but that's how you can tell they're a carnivore, because they initially come out at you with these stupid ideas of, well, what if I get gassy? Oh, I get gassy when I eat certain foods and they make me uncomfortable. It's probably because you haven't eaten a vegetable since you were well, maybe never with today's people. But this is about a primate center and a study showing that pregnancy affects the brain. Diet during pregnancy affects the brain. So they took them, and thank God they didn't give these poor things junk food, but they did put some of them on the Western diet, the typical Western diet, which is disgusting. It's, you know, the meat and sweet diet, but without the sweets, thank God. They weren't giving them horrible food. But it is challenging to study maternal diet in human participants due to difficulty in accurately monitoring food intakes. Yeah, people are too stupid to follow a diet is what the problem is, as I found out when I was running a weight management group. What our videos show, blah, 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 these juvenile monkeys were born and da-da-da-da-da-da. The behavior assessments in these videos comprise the human intruder, blah, blah, blah. The children... In children and other animals, temperament is assessed by measuring an individual's response to novel stimuli or situations. The novel stimuli, it can be a social stressor or non-social stressor, like a toy. So it can be social, like an unfamiliar person, or non-social, like a toy. They do this with autism a lot. If you ever watch them show the difference between an autistic person and a non-autistic person. Autistic people are not very interested in people or living things. They're more interested in inanimate objects. So all of the juvenile monkeys that took part in this study lived with indoor-outdoor social groups consisting of 12 to 15 other monkeys. They're da-da-da-da-da. Timeline detailed, yada yada yada. Acclimation, human intruder test. During the profile period, a woman with whom the monkey is unfamiliar enters the room and stands on the side of the cage, 1 foot away, and presents her facial profile toward the monkey. For 2 minutes, this represents a non-threatening social stimulus. Okay, the monkey's response to this profile stimulus by recording yada 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 yada. Okay, so let's skip down to the conclusions of this research. Okay, there's no conclusions, but this is about the novel food test, novel object test. Okay. So essentially what they discovered was a higher incidence of mental health issues when monkeys were not given. So some monkeys were given a controlled diet, a monkey chow, which is healthy, and some were given the Western diet with a higher content of fat and sugar, and their little babies weren't as healthy mentally or socially or emotionally. Okay, so that's the gist of this. You can read this on your own. So what people need to understand when we're looking at diet, we need to understand that the human animal is not the kind of animal that is primarily a predatory animal. The human animal is most similarly related to, and most likely, and we know this because hunter-gatherers ideally have the same diet as chimpanzees and bonobos do in the wild, except the hunter-gatherer cooks their food primarily. So when hunter-gatherers are in a similar environment to chimpanzees, they eat similar foods, they just cook them. They don't eat as much fruit. It's different proportions of the same foods, but they still eat the same foods. But they do not eat the large portions of meat. So, beyond increasing caloric intake, females can adopt other strategies to offset reproductive costs. Many mammals metabolize fat stores and lose weight during lactation. This is one of the reasons I think you see so many women that stay fat after pregnancy, is a lot of these stupid women these days are not breastfeeding their children. And what happens is they're continuing to remain quite heavy. So primates are thought to use a mixed strategy with how they work this out. Through several studies, several chimpanzee studies have described how female behavior changes with sexual receptivity. Fewer have examined behavioral changes when pregnant or lactating, blah, blah, blah. Study site population, behavioral data, yada, 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 behavioral metrics, travel budget, feeding budget. So chimpanzees are ripe fruit specialists. Now remember, I've been through this in my Dietary Wisdom of the Great Apes videos. And this is the thing. With people, I do suggest that you consume fruit. It's the kind of fruit that differs. I suggest the kind of fruit that is healthier, like tomatoes, squash, eggplant, things like that. Okay? So, sociality, this is about the party size and how they behave with each other, statistical analysis, yada, 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 results, travel budget, blah, 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 feeding budget, blah, 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 diet quality. They found that diet quality tended to differ by reproductive state. Both lactating and pregnant females consumed more fruit than non-pregnant, non-lactating females. Sociality. Average party size tended to differ. Okay, discussion. Female mammals and must balance, blah, blah, blah. We know all this jazz. But you can read this on your own. So keep in mind that female chimpanzees are ripe fruit specialists. And they consume more fruit when they're knocked up. So this is about nutritional geometry of female chimpanzees. So this is the different food items they consumed and the nutrient contents. These are ripe drupes, ripe figs, young leaves, pith, seed, flowers, bark. And this is what they contained as far as lipids are concerned. Amino acids, I believe. There you go. You can see all that. Ripe drupes. Again, drupes are like grapes, if I remember correctly. Nutrient balancing. The mean daily metabolizable energy intake of female chimpanzees is about 2,479 calories per day. Now remember that chimpanzees have a whole hell of a lot more muscle mass than humans do. Their lean body mass is much more than humans. So this is what they ate. The intake when drupes and figs dominated the diet, then when non-fruit foods dominated. So carbohydrates contributed more to daily energy intake when drupes and figs, so grape-like foods and figs dominated the diet, than when non-fruit foods dominated the diet. The contribution of this shows that they can adapt to different macronutrient compositions just like humans. I would assume honestly that if you want to know the truth, if you put chimpanzees on a lower carbohydrate fruit-centered diet with tomatoes and eggplant and things of that nature, and maybe some cabbage and things like that, you're going to see a great improvement in their health. Even more so than you would naturally. However, there was no significant difference between the contribution, blah, 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 when drupes dominated. Okay. Ratio of non-protein energy to available protein. Yada, yada. The kcal discussion. Let's go to that conclusion here. Oh, I don't get a conclusion. Well, let's just look at the results then. So this study used nutritional geometry to explore nutritional balancing strategies of female chimps in the face of fluctuating food resources. Their results showed that female chimpanzees ingest a variable amount of digestible carbohydrates and lipids. So people are wondering, where are you going to get your essential fatty acids? Oh, your essential fatty acids from food. That's where lipids. Female chimpanzees consumed more NP, non-protein energy. That's what NPE stands for. Intake when fruits were abundant. So when fruit was abundant, they were eating less protein and more carbohydrate by ratio. Duh. Although proteinaceous foods such as young leaves, so these are high protein foods, young leaves are easily available, chimpanzees seem to prefer sugary fruits. This is because the sugary fruits have glucose, which means energy. However, they also have much more lean body mass than people, so that glucose is going somewhere. You dig what I'm saying here? So they have lower protein. They also taste good. Okay, and that's the thing is, you gotta not eat things that taste good. As bad as that sounds, that is the #1 death trap for fat people, is eating things that taste good. Now, these chimpanzees probably were not heavy, because they're wild chimpanzees, and the foods they are eating are healthy, and they're moving around a lot. And also, they have higher lean body mass than people. Figs contain less protein than drupes, which explains why chimpanzees consumed more young leaves and other non-fruit fruit foods on fig days than on drupe days. So, when they did eat lower protein fruit, they did eat more young leaves to get that protein. Although drupes are richer in soluble carbohydrate and protein compared to figs, dominated the diet in terms of food intake and macronutrient contribution. This is partly because figs are more abundant. Okay, so they're also everywhere, so that could be why they eat more. Their analysis showed that chimpanzees achieve similar intakes of non-protein energy, calories, and similar contribution of carbohydrates, blah, 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 So, in line with their expectation, the non-protein energy ratio of the diet of the female is 7-to-1. So, they're eating 7 times the non-protein to protein ratio. That's not a ratio I recommend for people, but it works for the chimpanzees, okay? And it's a predominantly vegan diet, okay? So, those populations with a typical diet that is low in protein. Now, this is the thing. I can get way into this nonsense. I can get way into this with the importance of eating vegan protein and how vegan protein preserves and improves kidney function, whereas non-vegan protein shuts down the kidneys. But I'm not going to bother with that right now. What I am going to talk about here, though, is the populations with a typical diet that is low in protein relative to lipids and non-structural carbohydrates, and also high in fiber, such as the traditional Okinawan and Blue Zone Mediterranean diets, are notable for healthy metabolic profiles and long lifespans. So remember in my videos, The Dietary Wisdom of the Great Apes, I kept pointing this out, that you want to mimic a chimpanzee's diet. The Okinawan diet is the closest you're going to get to a chimpanzee diet in the civilized world. Okay? And there's ways to make it even better by going like vegan paleo, if you will, in many ways. So female chimpanzees regulate protein intake while maximizing non-protein energy during periods of high fruit intake. So female chimpanzees, the other thing that you need to understand about carbohydrates are protein sparing. So if you're taking in carbohydrates, you're not going to burn up your muscles. Okay? So that's one of the problems with a ketogenic diet, is some people lose protein on a ketogenic diet and get muscle wasting on a ketogenic diet. Female chimpanzees access and exploit different food types. Female chimpanzees eat a balance of protein to non-protein energy that is similar to other frugivorous primates, such as spider monkeys. So this is important stuff to know here when you want to find out what kind of diet a chimpanzee-like animal like us would want to eat, okay? So, vegan nutrition for mothers and children, practical tools for healthcare providers. Okay, so, as the number of subjects choosing vegan diets increases, healthcare providers must be prepared to give the best advice to vegan patients. Problem is, healthcare providers can't give the best advice to omnivorous patients because they're not well versed in nutrition. A completely plant-based diet is suitable during pregnancy. A completely plant-based diet is suitable during pregnancy. It is suitable during pregnancy, lactation, infancy, and childhood. Au contraire, I disagree with that. During infancy, a lacto diet is what is preferred. In fact, that should be continued for 2 full years to help with brain formation. Balanced vegan diets meet energy requirements on a wide variety of plant foods and pay attention to some nutrients that may be critical, such as protein, fiber, omega-3 fatty acids, which you can get from where? Oh, canola oil, flaxseed oil. Oh, and iron and zinc and iodine and calcium and vitamin D and vitamin B. You got to pay attention to these. However, so does everybody else. Well-planned vegan diets, when based on a wide variety of plant foods. This goes back to the dietary wisdom of the great apes. A high variety of foods in the diet translates to a healthier diet. As veganism gains popularity worldwide, it does so in Italy as well. Vegans account for 1% of the population, blah, blah, blah. Italian Society of Human Nutrition, or SINU, approves vegan diets during pregnancy, lactation, infancy, and childhood, and strongly suggests that government institutions and health and nutrition organizations provide more educational resources in order to help Italian plant-based eaters. In this scenario, a panel of experts from the Scientific Society for Vegetarian Nutrition, blah, 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 well-planned diets. Although often framed in terms of lacking, vegan diets are actually rich in a wide variety of foods. Grains, legumes, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds. Vegetable fats and herbs and spices. Concerns about vegan diets during pregnancy, breastfeeding, infancy, and childhood arose in the past, but this was due to the fact that although being categorized as vegan, the investigated subjects were following restrictive diets. This is a big problem. Now, part of my job when I worked in mental health was to work with anorexics and bulimics. So with anorexics and bulimics, a lot of them will say they're vegan, but they're really only using veganism as a strategy to not consume calories, because it allows them to say, oh, I can't eat that, it's not vegan. In reality, they're not eating frickin' anything. So these criteria: consume large amounts in a wide variety of plant foods, emphasizing intake of whole, minimally processed foods. A vegan diet can be nutritionally adequate when meeting the caloric requirements. So this is the thing. A lot of people think that you're going to lack proteins on a vegan diet. Not if you're meeting, number one, not if you're focusing on proteins like beans, but also not if you're meeting your caloric needs. I don't believe there has ever been an actual protein deficiency reported when calorie needs have been met. Although for optimizing longevity, you're going to want to optimize your amino acid profile. So that's a different story altogether. Limit the amount of vegetable fats as suggested by the dietary reference intake. I'm not a big believer in limiting that. Consume adequate amounts of calcium. Pay attention to vitamin D status. Vegan diets during pregnancy. So regarding protein requirements can be easily met on a vegan diet that includes a variety of plant foods and meets the caloric requirements. So remember I said focus on beans. Remember that. Okay, instead of focusing on whole grains, focus on whole beans and lentils and things like that. So beans, grains, nuts, and seeds, and green leafy vegetables are good sources of protein in vegan diets. In fact, 6 cups of broccoli has over 30 grams of 6 cups of Brussels sprouts, if you're having that as a meal. I have 6 cups of Brussels sprouts regularly as, say, a lunch, has over 30 grams of protein. Soy and its derivatives, pseudo-cereals such as buckwheat, quinoa, and amaranth, lupines, spinach, and hemp seeds have all the essential amino acids in proportion similar to animal foods. Pregnancy and lactation. Protein intake should be increased by 10% in vegan, pregnant, and lactating women. This is not, you're not requiring any type of supplementation yet, although I might recommend supplementation. And this is the thing. Dr. Atkins, I recommend reading Dr. Atkins' books. I recommend reading Dr. Wallach's books, particularly Dead Doctors Don't Lie. As far as Dr. Atkins is concerned, I strongly recommend reading the Atkins New Diet Revolution and reading Atkins, the Atkins Vitanutrient Revolution, I believe it's called, and the Atkins Age-Defying Revolution. Okay? So infancy and childhood. From 6 to 12 months of age, breast or formula milk are good sources of protein in addition to solid foods. Now, this is the thing, from 6 to 24 months, okay, you should be giving your child as much breast milk as possible. In my opinion, I'm not a physician, but that has the nutrients that are required for the brain and the nervous system to develop properly. In addition to the above-mentioned protein-rich plant foods during infancy and early childhood, breast milk and plant-based formula, and I wouldn't use a plant-based formula milk, but they're recommending a plant-based formula milk. I would recommend using breast milk, provide a good amount of protein. Only commercial infant formulas are recommended for vegan infants, and the use of homemade formulas is strongly discouraged. Yes, because homemade vegan formulas suck. Okay? And I do not recommend vegan diets in infancy. If you can't use human milk, I would suggest something like goat's milk or one of the formulas that's created that is actually completely synthetic. And they do have completely synthetic for babies with allergies, and I'll talk about that after this. Fiber is an abundant plant food and cannot be digested by human enzymes, okay? So, but it helps with the microbiome, as we know. Pregnancy and regular intake of food fiber, high fiber foods, as happens, and so helps fight constipation, fiber consumption, blah, blah, blah. Omega-3 fatty acids. Good sources of omega-3s include what? Flaxseed oil, chia seeds, walnuts, alpha-linolenic acid, and long-chained polyunsaturated PUFAs. Okay. And from this, you synthesize EPA and DHA. To maintain optimal omega-3 to omega-6 ratio, or omega-6 to omega-3 ratio, and favor the conversion of ALA into PUFAs, seed oils rich in omega-6 trans fats and tropical oils like coconut, palm, and palm kernel oils, rich in saturated fats, should be avoided. So, and this is one of the reasons I recommend sticking to a canola oil, because the balance of omega-6 to omega-3 is pretty good, and you have a lot of MUFAs in there. Inadequate intakes of energy, proteins, and micronutrients may also impair EPA to DHA synthesis. Pregnancy and lactation. You guys can read this on your own. It just goes on and on. Vitamin C and other organic acids. Of course, you're going to get a shit ton of these on a vegan diet, not on a carnivorous diet. So when we come back, I'm going to talk about how a vegan diet does not diminish nutrients in mother's breast milk. That's a common myth. This will be in my next video. I'm going to try and keep these videos to roughly a half an hour. But a vegan diet does not diminish the nutrients in mother's breast milk as previously thought. We're going to go over why it's a great idea to, this is going to be about pregnancy and breastfeeding, nutrition for pregnancy and breastfeeding. This is vegan nutrition for pregnancy and breastfeeding. And we're going to go over biomagnification and the problem with meat eating and the consumption of food that is much higher in heavy metal content and pesticide content. So people that are worried about getting pesticides and herbicides in their food should consider eating plant food and avoid eating animal food because of biomagnification. Okay, one of the ways, now I remember this from back in Boy Scouts when I was getting my naturalism merit badge. One of the ways they found out about the environmental impact of the A-bomb tests in New Mexico was that deer in the United States, in Pennsylvania, that were eating moss, lichen, from rocks, had radioactive milk. Their milk was radioactive. So they actually had radiation from the A-bomb testing in New Mexico in their milk. And that was discovered by conservationists in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's always been fantastic with conservation. But this is what you have to understand, and I'm going to even get into inoculants, soil inoculants, microorganisms, soil remineralization, all these things that people don't grasp, and I don't know how. This is all covered in basic freaking science in school. I covered in earth science, ecology, biology. I don't know what the hell people are learning in school these days, but it's clearly not what the hell I learned. And I didn't take any special agricultural courses. And to be 100% honest, now I have done a lot of reading on my own, but I'm serious. I'm telling you, fact of the matter. And I got thrown out of school for kicking people's asses in 3rd grade. And I learned more about this shit by 3rd grade than some college graduates know now. And it's very disturbing that people have college degrees and don't understand basics of biomagnification, the food web, the basic ecology, the water cycle, the carbon cycle, none of this shit. And I don't know how. It's very sad. Okay, and it's not just the U.S., because I argue with people all around the world, so it's not just a U.S. thing. It does seem to be a Western Hemisphere thing, though. But yeah, so when we come back, I'm going to knock this stuff out, and that's all for this video.